Big things are happening in the world of fictional old men. 1 dead, 2 dead Moonhead. The 5 elders have received a much-needed upgrade in the form of St. Figgle and Garling, and this has incredibly sinister implications for the future of One Piece, because the other 4 elders know something about Garling, something that makes them very uncomfortable. To be fair, I imagine that at this age, most things make them feel uncomfortable. But we actually begin this chapter with quite a touching moment as Kaku and Rob Lucci board a world government ship, and naturally, everyone's asking, where's Stussy? And Lucci's response is that she dead. I'm not sure if the implication is that Lucci's trying to say that he's the one who killed her. One of the early translations did have Lucci flat out saying, I killed her. So we'll see when the official comes out. And I don't know if Oda's intention here is to try and deceive the reader, because the last time we saw Kaku, he was warning Stussy about Lucci's fury, and he said that he wouldn't be able to stop him from attacking her. So putting that event together with this event, it is logical to assume that Lucci made good on Kaku's words, but I don't buy this for a second. It's been extremely subtle, but Lucci's character is definitely softened over the course of Egghead Island, and we have seen him make time for and prioritize his bonds. Like the brilliant moment when he asked Marcus Mars to spare Kaku's life. So here's what I think happened. Kaku told Lucci the truth, that Stussy released him from bubble prison because she considered him a friend, and Lucci, who also considers Kaku a friend, is either now covering for Stussy or much more likely covering for Kaku. Because if Lucci doesn't take responsibility for this event, then it all falls onto his giraffe friend, and Kaku may even be punished for allowing a known enemy to escape. Lucci doesn't want that, so he reports that Stussy is dead and he may have killed her. Or I guess it's also possible that Kaku may have lied to Lucci, but I don't see Lucci being particularly easy to deceive like that. Either way, I guess one or both of them is now just hoping that Stussy is smart enough to hide herself and lay low for a bit, which I think is a safe bet considering that she was both CP0 agent and an Emperor of the Underworld, so she can be trusted to lay low and keep secrets. I feel like I say this every week and then it doesn't happen, but this does feel like the final chapter of Egghead Island. And now that I've said that, watch me be wrong again next week. But the one thing I still so desperately want to know as we wrap up all of this is what was the mission of Katarina Devon and Van Alger on Egghead Island? Apart from infringing on St. Saturn's copyright, what was their purpose? Because they were there before the Marines got there. They might not even have known that St. Saturn was going to be there. So I have questions that need answering from an enigmatic beard man, all of which are traditionally quite enigmatic in One Piece. Whitebeard and Blackbeard have a lot to answer for. For one, calling themselves beards despite the fact their faces are obviously nude. And it really does make you wonder just what was going on down there. Does the carpet match the drapes? I mean, in this case, there were no drapes, so what I'm expecting is a smooth wooden floor varnished to perfection. And gentlemen, if you too would like your One Piece to be real, then you need the sponsor of today's video, Manscaped. There's a reason why Whitebeard was always flanked by scantily clad nurses, and it's because he kept his old chap in good working order, which you can do through the Performance Package 5.0, featuring the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Electric Trimmer to up your grooming game with the next-gen dual skin safe blade heads. And this magical device will have your unruly little garden looking more like a suave long ring long land in no time. And also more things like this. This is the Weed Whacker 2.0. It's a nose hair trimmer, and I actually used its predecessor, the Weed Whacker, this one. And now that I have 2 of them, what I can do is make them battle to the death to see which of the whackers is... It's this one. And also included in the package are the Crop Soother and Crop Preservers to keep your holy land revitalized and refreshed. And if you'd like to join the 10 million handsome chaps worldwide who invest in the well-being of their own personal Gekomorias, then you can and should check out Manscaped through my link in the description to get your hands on the Performance Package 5.0 and use my code GLR20 to get 2 free gifts, free international shipping, and 20% off. And once you get that 20% off, you can get some of that hair off, and then you can go and get someone else off. Always pay it forward. So absolutely check out Manscaped, highly recommended by a man on the internet, but for now, it's back to you. Me. St. J. Garcia Saturn has apparently been a very naughty boy, and not in the good kind of subjugation of the masses sort of naughty. During a mini flashback, it was revealed that Saturn was the one who gave the command to preserve Emmet after he attacked Marijois 200 years ago. First thing about this flashback is that Saturn looks exactly the same. So whatever pact was made with Emu seems to have halted his aging, and there's no exactly telling how old Saturn was. Could be lots. I mean, it is lots, but how many lots? And we'll get to the stuff about Emu's power powers in a bit because, mate, that was a horrific death. But firstly, I'd like to say that Imu's course of action in this chapter was extremely warranted because it was the whims of Saturn that caused absolutely everything that happened on Egghead Island. Whether it be his sapphire scale research that started the chain of events with Kuma and Bonnie that created 2 sun gods now, 2 joy people, or preserving Emmett just so that he could end up being the reason why the Straw Hats and a Vegapunk escaped. It's actually difficult to comprehend just how much of a colossal screw-up Saint Saturn is. His actions may very well be the catalyst for the dissolution of the entire world government. At the moment, there is no one more to blame than him. Because if he had just followed orders and disposed of the robot, then Luffy and the Straw Hats would be flat out dead right now. Gear 5th is crazy powerful, but its limitations leave Luffy with these pockets of vulnerability, and if he was forced to keep fighting all of the elders and a Buster Call, then he would have eventually fallen, very potentially like the Joy Boy before him. So in a sickening twist of events, there is actually a solid argument to be made that Saint Saturn is our MVP of Egghead Island because none of this would have happened without him. I guess I never expected one of the 5 elders to disobey Imu, to let his ambition supersede his loyalty, but I don't know why I didn't expect that. These guys all quite literally refer to themselves as gods, and as much as they bow before Imu, they must all have tremendously inflated egos, and it makes me wonder what liberties the other 4 elders have taken during their time. But I have to say, I am so satisfied with the death of Saturn, because it is well deserved from every perspective. From the viewpoint of our protagonist, Saturn is one of the most putrid One Piece villains to have ever existed. He did horrific things to Ginny, Kuma, and Bonnie, and he more than deserves this, I guess we'll call it moral punishment. But then you switch to the viewpoint of Saturn's allies, and he cost them everything. No event in the last 800 years has undermined the world government's authority as much as the Egghead Island incident, and it was practically orchestrated by Saturn's hubris. So let's say that you're Emu, right? You need to set an example. Saturn was a man who lived for however many centuries, and he became far too comfortable in his position of power. So he took stupid risks, and we can't do that. We need to get our shit together. And I doubt that the other elders are going to be taking such risks after seeing this. Narratively, it's also perfect. I've spoken about this in previous videos, but I was dead set on the hope that Saint Saturn wasn't going to make it off Egghead Island because he has no role to play in the story going forward. His character was utilized to perfection during this arc, and if he stuck around, it would only be to waste space on pages fighting someone in the final saga, like how Jack's character was fully explored on Zou, but Oda carried him over to Wano, and he was mostly a waste of what little space he was given there. That's why this is a very conflicting chapter, because I'm extremely happy with one death, but kind of annoyed at the 3 to 4 fake-out deaths. We'll get to them. To conclude Saturn though, his death looks suitably painful. The dude shriveling and melting away to nothing but bones gives me the impression that what Imu did was actually quite simple, and perhaps it was something like releasing their connection or their pact, which then caused Saturn's real age to catch up with him. His body was no longer being artificially sustained, so it all just decomposed. It was quite visceral. And the reactions of the Vice Admirals were masterfully done. Oda gave all of them an expression of legitimate horror, which I praise because that's difficult to do when your characters look like Vice Admiral Red King, someone so cartoony that it's difficult not to laugh anytime he does anything. But even Red King hit me with a feeling of serious horror that was happening right in front of him. And you really have to wonder about these Vice Admirals. After having seen what happened to Saturn, surely they are starting to feel like maybe they're on the wrong side here. Which actually, before Saturn died, this point was brought up by Vice Admiral Doberman. Doberman is your classic One Piece Vice Admiral. We first met him during Enies Lobby, as he was one of the chosen 5 to lead that Buster Call, meaning that this is Doberman's second time commanding a Buster Call on an island involving Nico Robin. And of all people, he asked a very ballsy question in this chapter. Saturn referred to the primary failure being the inability to stop Vegapunk's message. And so Doberman asked, "Mate, Mr. Saturn, if we failed, does that mean that there was some truth to the old Appleman's message?" And it's like, bruh, you saw Saturn turn into a colossal spider monster, and you think it's a good idea to openly ask if he's the bad guy? So Doberman gets his head popped, though I think he'll be fine. Whether it be Haki or Mercy from Saturn, his head didn't completely explode like that one poor Marine we saw. But these Vice Admirals, they've seen some stuff today. And I bet that most of them are questioning what exactly it is they're fighting for. Especially since they all now know a very forbidden name because Saint Saturn, he messed up one last time here, not even capable of dying properly, just as I'm not even capable of speaking properly. But the last thing Saturn did was he screamed Emu's name in the presence of these insects. The Vice Admirals aren't even world nobles, who also probably don't know Emu's name either, but you've now given the secret name to 9 insects who are going to take it back to their hives. Also, here's another thing about Doberman. He's one of the Marines who practices absolute justice. So it's actually huge to have a representative of the most loyal faction speaking up and questioning the world government. Because absolute justice believers aren't inherently evil people. They're willing to do evil things for the greater good, but only because they can see that light. And without that light, what do they have? Not a lot, if anything. But we're moving onwards now to Saint Saturn's replacement, and there's no way I could have predicted this. This is wild. But Vigilant Garling is the new warrior god of science and defense, and there is a lot happening here. Firstly, the way in which Garling casually strolls into the room of authority looks more intimidating than I think any of the other Elder Stars have ever looked, even in their transformed states. There's something about Garling that exudes serious business. And maybe it's just because I've watched the 5 Elders be bested by a cartoon, and for the rest of my days I will never be able to get pouty Marcus Mars out of my mind. But the 4 remaining elders all feel so powerless before Garling. They even try to check him. They're all like, "Oh, don't you go speaking to us in those weird ways, Garling." And Garling's just like, "Dude, you're not my bosses anymore." And Garling's presence makes the Elder Stars feel like a genuine threat to me again. And this was very needed after their complete failure on Egghead. And even though this still isn't technically canon, the Figaland name first appeared in One Piece film Red. It was mentioned by Ethan Barron Venus Juro, and he did so in quite an exasperated way. The same sort of way that Sengoku talks about Garp's family, implying that the Figalands are a different and troublesome family, which, given Shanks, fair enough, but I doubt that Garling is immune from this impression. So that's why there's an added layer of tension here. It's not just that Saturn has been killed and replaced, I guess that happens from time to time, but it's that he's been replaced by a Figaland. And despite Garling's immaculate service, the other 4 elders seem to inherently distrust him. So let's talk about the suit. I love it. It's very clean and imposing. And you can very much tell that Garling is from the same generation as Garp, because Prime Garp dressed very much the same way 20 to 30 years ago. Black suit, bright jacket, it was the style at the time. But I like the idea that this decision didn't take Garling by surprise. Because I don't know about you, but if I was called upon to become an Elder Star, I would have nothing appropriate to wear. So what I'm picturing is Garling having planned this moment for decades. So much so that he's had an Elder Star suit on hand, ready to don at a moment's notice. But here's a question. Who gave Garling this order? The obvious and I think only answer is Emu or Emu's servant, but that would imply that Garling knows about Emu, or at least knows enough to know that he outranks the elders. Although the most exciting part about this promotion to me is that Garling is almost certainly going to get his own yokai transformation. And there's a couple of yokai who have fun moon bases, and one of them is Katsura Otoko, a handsome man who lives in the face of the moon, which very much tracks with Garling's youth. He was quite the ladies' man, and who knows, he might still be. There's also a Jade Rabbit yokai who lives on/in the moon, but it could also have nothing to do with the moon. Although I doubt it, because this makes me feel so stupid in retrospect, and I'm sure that other people somewhere have called this, but Garling was so obviously set up to become an elder, because the moon is his motif. And so what we've now done is we've gotten rid of the planet Saturn, and we've replaced him in our One Piece solar system with the moon, which likely makes the other planets very jealous because the moon is closest to the Earth in this case being what Emu represents. And one thing we should also consider is that Garling's promotion means that the Holy Knights now need a new commander. They've been set up to be a very major faction going forward, and I am more keen than ever to learn more about them. Right now, let's get into some Vega chat. In the previous chapter, I discussed what I really liked about what happened with Lilith, being that she was the last remaining Vegapunk, but seemingly incorporated the aspects of all of the other punks bar Greed, and thus became the next true Stella. But as it turns out, none of that is actually true. When Lilith said that everyone else was alive, she was being quite literal. I guess for a second, I forgot that I was reading One Piece. Part of me is definitely happy that Atlas, Edison, Pythagoras, and Shaka do live on, and they're all now bodily roommates in this wild character design that Frankenstein's them all together. But as always with One Piece, I can't help but feel a bit robbed at another set of fake-out deaths. To be clear here, these deaths are different, because since the very beginning, one of the main themes of Egghead Island has been what constitutes constitutes death. Be it biological, be it clones or mechanical, and logically, this does make sense. If Vegapunk can separate those aspects from himself in the first place, then why can't their consciousness be uploaded to some other big brainy thing and live on? Because what even are they? They themselves don't even know. Shaka couldn't even comprehend what death meant for his existence. And I mean, that's practically the title of the chapter. Everything works. This isn't a Pell, Pagaya, or Pound situation where survival makes little to no sense, but I do still personally feel a bit robbed. Because with Shaka, Pythagoras, and Atlas, their death scenes were so good. Especially Atlas's, and I'm a bit tired of Oda milking these scenes with these emotions and not following through. Because every time it happens, it makes me care a lot less about the next character who's in danger and or given a death scene. Mark my words, something similar to this is going to happen with a character on Elbaf, and when I discuss the chapter that week, I'm gonna feel nothing. Because in the back of my mind, I'm gonna be thinking that it's not real, and that Oda is gonna pull another fake out death. And if Oda had to do this, what I wish is that the Vegapunks combined into a new body, not just pieces of their old bodies, and that they could actually become a new satellite, Punk 7 or whatever. Because that would still give their sacrifices some weight, because we still would have lost those characters. At least those incarnations of them. I'll also say that I predict that upon rereading Egghead Island, I'll probably be a lot more generous about this, because it is both thematically and logically sound, but right now, it's just not for me. I mean, why do we even care about Lilith surviving now? If we didn't rescue her, she'd still be alive with all of her punk people anyway. And here's the thing, if this is the only time that this had happened in One Piece, I would probably be calling this fantastic. But because I've experienced over 1,100 chapters of fake out deaths, this situation, as well written as it is, just feels like another example to add to a very large pile. Every fake out death that has come before it has pulled me out of this and made me quite cynical about it. And the one thing I'm really hoping for right now is, of course, that Stella remains dead, which it looks like he is, and in defense of this decision, it is very nice that his will now lives on in its entirety, with the 6 aspects still able to influence the world around them, and hopefully work towards completing Vegapunk's dream. I did also laugh when Atlas suggested that they throw away all of the spare York bits. That was pretty funny. And after taking Punk Records high into the sky, they contacted someone that I did not expect to see. Their first point of call was Haradas on Witheria, which is where Nami spent 2 years during the time skip. And of course, Haradas knows Vegapunk. That's probably how Witheria was even made in the first place. It's not a natural sky island. It was one that was probably constructed with Vegapunk's cloud tech. So I wonder if these 2 islands are gonna link up. And what I also really like is the idea of Punk Records not falling into the hands of the world government, or in fact anyone. Instead, it's floating up into the sky, and it's going to leave the world until humanity is capable of using it without destroying themselves, which Shaka estimates will be about 500 years, which is the length of time that Vegapunk was stated to be looking ahead into the future. There is something really nice and grand about that, and part of me hopes that by the end of One Piece, humanity still will not be ready to use Punk Records, and that Punk Records is a tale for another time in the distant future, that it represents a hope that one day humanity will become that utopian vision that Vegapunk desired, and that maybe along the way the next great generation will stumble upon it during their adventure. This also turns Punk Records into a new Phantom Island, which is very exciting. The only other Phantom Island we knew about before now is Zoe, and stuff like that just makes this world so much more magical. But not as magical as the most magical moment of all, right at the end of the chapter, which is that Dragon finally looks like he is strongly considering making a move for the first time since Logtown. And we are going to talk about all of this alongside the rest of the Revolutionary Army revelations in the next video.